guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I'm going to be bringing you the first of my mid-year series videos. So if you guys are pretty new to my channel, twice a year I kind of check in and let you guys know how I'm progressing with series that I've been reading throughout the year. So when it gets to the end of the year, I make it all in one massive video that can be anything from like 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how many series I've been reading throughout the year. And at the midpoint, I make 2 videos. This one is going to be the first where I'm talking about all of the series that I finished and that I am currently up to date on. Usually I also talk about any series that I've decided that I won't be continuing with or DNFs. However, I have not DNF'd any series within the first 6 months of the year. I have actually just DNF'd a series in July, but as that is now the second half of the year, you are going to have to wait until the end of the year to find out which one that was. Or you could also find out in my monthly wrap up or my reading vlogs. So series have always been a problem for me in that I love them so much, but I keep starting so many because new ones just sound so interesting and I start them and then I struggle to keep up with them or finish them. However, I'm doing really well. So in this video last year, I had 10 series to talk about. This year I have 11, and even though that is one more, that's actually a good thing because these are all of the series that I'm up to date on or completed. So I'm actually progressing to the end of a series or keeping on top of new releases. And then in the second part of this check-in, which is going to be all of the series that I've either made progress on or started in 2022 but have not finished, I only have 10 series to talk about as opposed to 18 from last year. So I think what's happening, I have read a little bit less than I typically do so far in 2022, which you can learn a little bit more about in my mid-year stats check-in if you haven't watched that video yet. But aside from just generally reading less, what this is showing me is that I am starting and finishing series before moving on and just starting a whole bunch more of them, which is ideally what I want. That's what I want to be progressing towards. So I think after a couple of years of desperately trying to get on track with this, I'm actually finally making some progress, which is great. The series I'm talking about today are not going to be any particular order aside from the 2 sections that they are going to be split into, and the first section we'll be starting with is the series that I have completed. So as far as I'm aware, there are going to be no further books published in any of these series, and I have read everything published so far, possibly excluding any novellas. So there are 7 series that I finished in total, and I'm actually going to be kicking off with the 2 that I've unhauled. So we're starting on a little bit of a low note because obviously I didn't enjoy these series enough to keep them, but if I don't start with these, I'm definitely going to forget about them. So the first one, and one that was part of my series in a week vlog series that I do where I binge through an entire series in a week, was the Selection series by Kira Cass. So this one is a young adult dystopian series that is pegged as like The Bachelor meets The Hunger Games, and we're following this girl called America who lives in this broken society where you're given a number and then your family is restricted to forever work in that profession. So I can't remember what number America works in, but essentially her family all have to work like in some area of the arts, and the only way to get out of your number is to like marry into a different one. So when a prince comes of age in this world, they hold a selection where they get a young lady from each of the districts of the country. They take them all to the palace and they kind of have to compete to win the prince over so that the prince will marry them essentially. So America is chosen for this competition and she goes to the palace, and then we end up with like she has a childhood crush, so there's a bit of a love triangle going on. This series was okay. Like a lot of people say it's a real junk food series. It's not good for you, but it's really addictive. I do definitely understand why people regard it as that. I do think that I read this when I was a little bit too old though, so it didn't have the desired effect on me. It was pretty fun. I listened to the audiobooks, which was a really good idea because I don't think I could have made it through this series reading it physically, because it would have taken me a lot longer because I wouldn't have been able to read like while I was working and things like that. So I think that the audiobooks definitely helped me, and I did find the first trilogy to be especially entertaining, and it did have a couple of moments that shocked me. So I gave each book in the first trilogy 3 stars, and then the 2 spin-off books books that are like, they're books 4 and 5 in the series. They're following the daughter of some characters from the first trilogy. I just didn't understand the point. There was no point in the plot of that series. I really didn't like following the main character, and also like just the ending of it just didn't make sense. So I gave both of those ones 2 stars. Glad that I read them because a lot of people talk about them and a lot of people were obsessed with them back in the day and keep telling me like, I loved this, like you should read it just to see what you think. So I am glad that I read it, but definitely not one that I needed to keep and not one that I'm ever going to want to revisit. The other series I unhauled is the Dreamblood Duology by N.K. Jemisin. I read this for Aaron from Booked & Busy's Busy Bee Book Club, and I don't even remember what it was about now because my issue mainly with this series is that I was just really bored and it just was not compelling to me. But this one is set in a world where your dream energy can be harvested and channeled into things like healing, and we're following a variety of characters in this world. Some people are, I can't remember what the name for them is, but they're people that can travel through people's dreams and like harvest this dream energy, and they also have the ability to kill people like that as well. So we follow a couple of those, and then we also follow a woman from a different country and a different culture who view this magic as barbaric. It's a very political series, which is something that I really didn't enjoy about it, because I have discovered that I do actually like political fantasy, but I like it to be more than a series of conversations between very powerful people. I like it when the root of the story is political, but it's not the entirety of the story. And this just felt like a series of conversations between various important people in this world that just were not compelling to read. So I did also have a hard time following this one because my level of interest just wasn't there. And the sequel, I think, takes place 10 years after the events of the first book, but there was so much included in the second book about like lines of succession and various like stray characters that I feel like could have been expanded on a lot more and would have provided a more compelling story than the story that we actually got. And these don't actually have to be read as a duology, I feel, because even though one takes place after the other and hinges on the resolution of the first one, their plot lines are completely separate and follow like different areas of the magic and the world, so like they could both be read as standalones. So I think I gave the first one 3 stars and the second one 2 stars. A little bit sad because I expected great things from N.K. Jemisin, and alas, this duology was not for me. I do still have the first Broken Earth book, and I also have The City We Became, so I'm not giving up hope on N.K. Jemisin. I was just disappointed by this one because I expected great things from N.K. Jemisin. In June, I read the entirety of the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee, which is another example of a series that was just a little bit too political. I did really enjoy this series and I gave every book 4 stars, which each installment being just a little bit better. But the more the series went on, the more I became attached to the characters, which is what is most important for me when it comes to the enjoyment of a series. But I enjoyed the plot less and less with every book. So this one is an adult urban fantasy that centers around 2 clans who are fighting for control of the jade in the world. This story is set on Kekon, which is an island that mines jade, and the Kekonese are the only people in the world who can really tolerate jade and also harness its abilities, which gives them like enhanced speed, enhanced strength, more dexterity and things like that. So the 2 clans in here are the No Peak clan and the Mountain clan, and we are predominantly following the Calls, who are the leaders of the No Peak clan. These 2 clans used to be the same, however they diverged a couple of generations ago when they had very different opinions on how they should control jade and how they should like give the rest of the world access to the jade. And they have had a tentative peace for these generations, but they come to a point where there's just like little acts of aggression going on between the 2 clans that they can't necessarily pinpoint as each other up until something really big happens, and it is undeniable that these clans are going to go to war. So I really enjoyed the series as a whole because with every book I just got more and more attached to the Call family. There is a lot of grey morality in here because this is essentially I guess a mafia story with a little bit of fantasy. One of the reasons why none of these books got 5 stars for me as well is because the fantasy element in this series is the jade. However, you could swap the jade out for something else like petrol, oil, diamonds, and the story would essentially be the same, because the only thing that the fantasy element adds to this series is like flashier action scenes. While it is a fantasy story set in a fantasy world with some fantastical elements, violence. That's definitely not the focus of the story in here. And there's a lot more conversation about like power, family, honor, race and culture than there is about the fantastical elements in here. Politics just got a little bit much for me as this series went on as well, because as we are building power for the clans, we're doing that through the classic things you expect like territory wars, but we're also doing it through like acquiring movie studios and making the clan and the Kekanese culture more successful by the way that it's portrayed in movies, which is what I mean when I say like a lot of things about race and culture are discussed in this as well. So the plot was kind of what I expected in the first book, but with each book it got more and more international and more kind of away from the clan war to a point where it just wasn't as interesting to me. But by that point I was so hooked on the Cole family that I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So definitely enjoyed this, would recommend. But sadly I expected this to be one of my new favorite series ever and it didn't quite hit that mark. I also finished up the Ravens Duology by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page. I believe I actually had an e-arc of the sequel to this, which was The Monarchs, and this one is like a new adult contemporary witchy story set in a sorority. Now I will say that while this is marketed as new adult, there's nothing really that wouldn't be suitable for a young adult audience. It's just that the characters are of college age and they're in a sorority. So this one is dual perspective and we are following two members of this sorority. One of them is a legacy member who's gunning for president, and the other one is a girl who doesn't know that she's a witch, and after attending a party she ends up pledging for the Ravens, and those two have an instant disliking to each other. However, they do end up having to work together as members of the sorority start to go missing one by one. I actually really like this duology. It's not the kind of thing that you'd think I would enjoy, but I have very recently realized that I actually really like contemporary witchy series that are set in the real world and feel kind of like a slasher movie but in a book, with just like that little bit of spooky vibe provided by the witchy element. It's not the best thing I've ever read, but I definitely think it's a good time and it does deliver on, like I said, those autumnal witchy vibes. I finally finished Rat Queens by Curtis J. Weeb, or it started off as Curtis J. Weeb, and by the end of it I'm not really sure who the author is. If you look at my series spreadsheet, I might include a screenshot here. I started that spreadsheet at the beginning of 2019 and this is the very first series on there, with me having started the series, like read this first volume in 2018. So it's been a long time and it's like only a comic series. But this one is an adult swords and sorcery series following 4 boozy battle maidens for hire who, after one bar fight too many, end up getting thrown into jail, and to be released they have to perform a quest for the realm. Now the plot does advance from there and there is like an overarching plot that starts at around volume 3 or 4 and carries it through to the end of the series. This started off really strong and I really liked the first 2, maybe 3 volumes of this, but after that it started to go downhill rapidly, and the last volume is actually the worst that I've read. I ended up giving it 2 stars, and it's not officially finished either, it's just finished the story arc. So I don't know whether they're going to be coming back, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to be continuing with the series if they do return with new content. The good times at the beginning were good, but the end was just truly bad. It was disjointed. It skipped like the majority of the resolution of the actual conflict of this big story arc, and it's sad because I really fell in love with the characters throughout this series, like especially throughout the beginning, and by the end it had just lost everything that I loved about it, and it was just like a poorly constructed, very weak storyline. I also read the Bellinger Sisters duology by Tessa Bailey, which is It Happened One Summer and Hook, Line and Sinker. This is a adult romance duology following the Bellinger sisters, who are from this very quiet, sleepy fishing town. However, after their father died when they were children, their mother remarried this really rich guy. I think he's a movie producer or something, and they've been living the life in LA. However, Piper is a little bit more unruly than her younger sister Hannah, and she is essentially an it girl, so partying is her profession. And one day she gets herself in trouble with this like scandalous party, and so her stepfather sends her to the town where their birth father was from to kind of make her appreciate what she's got and kind of learn to behave by forcing her out of this life of privilege into this very quiet town where nothing really happens. And there she meets Brendan, who is a crab fisherman and is pretty much the polar opposite of her. It's a grumpy sunshine romance, so she's sunshine, he's grumpy. And I actually didn't love this one so much. Brendan surprisingly didn't do it for me. I really thought it was going to be a hit from the synopsis, but I also just didn't really feel the chemistry between them. I didn't think that Piper was a particularly like believable character. Like she never felt like a real person to me. However, I absolutely adored the sequel Hook, Line and Sinker, which is about Piper's younger sister Hannah and another crab fisherman called Fox. And that one is more of a like friends to lovers story where he's essentially this like really pretty fuckboy and she's very quiet and subdued and he's attracted to her, she's attracted to him, but like neither one of them want to risk their friendship. I adored that one. Didn't really love this one so much, but I am definitely interested in reading more from Tessa Bailey in the future. And then the final series that I've actually completed is the Rainwild Chronicles by Robin Hobb, which we all knew I was obviously going to complete because this is part of my book club, catch-up book club, and we are currently reading the entirety of the Realm of the Earthlings. We actually only have 2 books left. We are up to book 15 and 16 and I cannot believe it. But this one is the 4th series in the Realm of the Earthlings and it is the only one that's actually 4 books in total. And realistically it didn't really need to be because some of these are quite a bit shorter than any other books in the Realm of the Earthlings. But it's hard to say what this one's about without ruining the live ship traders, and there's no point in really giving you the synopsis of the live ship traders because it's very different. It's just all of the events of this hinge on things that have happened earlier on in the Realm of the Earthlings. But in this one, we are essentially following a group of young humans who are the misfits of their community. Like they have been ostracized for whatever reason, or they don't feel like they belong there. And they have volunteered to move a small group of dragons to a different location because this community essentially said they'd look after the dragons. As the dragons are growing up, they're getting a bit rowdy and they want more space for themselves. And the people want them to stop destroying the area that they've got them in. So they task this group of people to move them on to a different location. This tells you a lot more about the magic of the world and also the dragons in the Realm of the Earthlings, which you kind of expand upon with every book in every series within the Realm of the Earthlings. Something that I also really like about these series and this setting, so it's the 2nd and 4th series in the Realm of the Earthlings, is that they do go into the magic a lot more and they're also multi-perspective, so you get more of an expansive view than you do in the Fitz books. Definitely my least favourite series in the Realm of the Earthlings so far in terms of the characters, which a lot of them were really just not likeable, and also the plot, the pacing was a little bit off, but I did very much value the information that we got about that magic, the lore, the history, and the dragons in this series. Okay, so moving on to the ones that we are up to date on. I'm going to start with one that I'm not sure if I'm DNFing because I'm not even sure if I can give you guys a synopsis for this right now, but that is the Kithamar series by Daniel Abraham. It is just the first book that's been published so far, Age of Ash, and this one is about a thief whose brother has been murdered in this city called Kithamar, which is a center of like trade and wealth, and her brother's been killed and she very much wants to find out what happened to him because she doesn't believe it was just like a chance mugging or something like that. She thinks that there was a reason for it, and then she wants to find the people behind his death as well. So this to me was just not a very interesting book to read. Although I did really enjoy the concept, I don't think the execution quite worked. So I can't tell you a whole ton about the plot of this right now because it wasn't that interesting, but I do very much remember that this is like a character driven story if the city was the character as opposed to the actual people. So you'll get like little chapters in here that follow insignificant characters but contain a little bit of world building, and I think that the world building is extremely extensive in here because you will also have characters that are just like they're going somewhere, they have a purpose, but it will stop to describe like a little bit of architecture or a little bit of like the culture of the society that live in the area of the city where this character currently is. So I like the concept of that, but just in execution it's not very compelling to read because a lot of it is just like pages and pages of description that isn't actually relevant to the plot that's going on. About halfway through this, I did enjoy it a lot more, but the first half really was a drag for me. So overall, I gave this one 3 stars, and I don't know if I'm going to continue with this series yet. I will be deciding when the synopsis of the sequel is revealed, because I think that this is actually going to tell the story of this city through the ages with like a common thread that ties everything together, but you're going to be following different characters every time. So I want to see if the synopsis of book 2 sounds like something that will make this series worth continuing for me, but at the minute I'm not too sure. I am now of course also up to date on Crescent City by Sarah J Maas, which is Sarah J Maas's first adult series, although ACOTAR is now also adult. I did reread House of Earth and Blood this year as well, and it's still my favorite book ever. I was even more emotional the second time around. The second book disappointed me a little bit, and I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy the direction of the third book, but I do still very much love the characters and the setting of this series. So if you guys don't know what this one is about, it is an urban fantasy following a half-fae woman called Bryce Quinlan, who has been tasked by the Archangel Micah with solving a string of murders. So 2 years prior to the start of this story, they thought they'd actually already put the murderer behind bars. However, 2 years on, where this story kicks off, the murders have started again, so they're thinking that maybe they arrested the wrong person. And as the main character Bryce has a personal connection to this case, the Archangel asks her to be the one to investigate it, and because it's dangerous, he assigns her a bodyguard in the form of fallen angel Hunt Athalar. I just love how expansive this series. I love how attached to the characters I am. I love the romance, the themes of like trauma, healing, recovery, all of that kind of stuff. I love how Sarah J Maas writes really cinematic scenes, and one thing that she can do is make you care about characters. Even if she decides that she's going to make you hate a character and love another one, she can do that as well. And like I said with the Greenbone Saga, like attachment to characters is the most important thing to me in a series, so that is why I absolutely love her books, and this one in particular. The second one felt very much like it was getting everything in place for the third book in the series. And like I said, based on the end of the second book, I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy the direction of the third book, but I can't say anything about that until it actually arrives, but I'm a little bit concerned, shall we say. First book that I read this year actually was a 700-page chunker, which was the 4th book in the Fortuna Swan series by KJ Sutton. This one is an indie fantasy romance series about a young woman called Fortuna who is a nightmare, which means that she can sense people's worst fears and make them believe that they're experiencing them. Nightmares are actually quite a rare species now, and Fortuna's brother actually went missing 2 years prior to the start of this story, and after spending 2 years desperately searching for him, she is about to give up until she is approached by a very powerful fairy male who says he knows exactly where her brother is and will take her directly to him, providing that she marries him. This series has multiple love interests, and something that I do really love about it is that Kelsey makes you believe in both of them. Like, I definitely have a preference here, but I also wouldn't necessarily be mad if the one that I wanted was an endgame, because I also do really love the other one. This series has some pacing issues throughout the beginning, which is the one kind of, I would say, flaw in it. I think it's a little bit too fast-paced in the first 2 books, and then the third one is a lot slower, but I think the 4th book has ironed out the pacing perfectly. We still have a lot of moments of high action throughout, which keep the book moving, but the bits in between are a lot slower to kind of like give you a breather and time to collect your thoughts and kind of like retain all of the information that you're reading, instead of it being like a series of action scenes back to back. I'm very excited for the final 2 books in this series, but I love this series so much, and I identify with Fortuna so much, who is definitely a flawed main character. She's very stubborn. She thinks that she knows best when she doesn't. She's reluctant to ask for help from anyone. She's also very guarded. Like, I would say that she's a Taurus, because she has a lot of the same traits as me that are representative of like Taurus as a sign, but she's very guarded. She doesn't trust people quickly. She's very standoffish, but when people get to know her, she's like a teddy bear, and she cares deeply about the people who are part of her family. So yeah, I really love the 4th book. It's actually my favorite book in the series, and I'm very excited for book 5 and 6. And I think the final series that I'm now up to date with is the Burning series by Evan Winter, the first book being Rage of Dragons and the second being Fires of Vengeance. So this one is an adult epic epic fantasy series following a guy called Tao who lives in a matriarchal society where the women have the ability to call down dragons. They can channel the strength of a dragon into men. They can also control dragons. If you are a man in this world, you have a couple of purposes that you can fulfill. If you're somebody who is able to have the strength of a dragon channeled into you, then you're a little bit higher in society and you're part of the nobility. But generally for men who aren't part of the nobility, the only future that they have is forced conscription into the army, where they'll be put on the front lines and essentially used as fodder for this endless war between Tao's people and the rest of the world. So after Tao reconnects with his childhood crush, he decides that this isn't a future he wants for himself, and he has a plan to get out of it up until the nobility do something terrible to his community and his family. And from that moment on, he has a singularly driven focus to enter the military, train as hard as he can, and get to a point where he can challenge the people that wronged his community and his family and get revenge for what was done to them. So I really like the audiobooks for this series to start off with. The narrator has an absolutely beautiful voice that is like butter, and the narration of this is excellent. It's also a surprisingly quick read, whether you listen to the audio or read it physically, because there's actually a lot of action scenes in here. And considering it is adult epic fantasy and it is a little bit dense, like, you learn the world gradually throughout this first book, and then it continues to expand a little bit in the second. There is a glossary, but if you're looking for like a more natural learning of the world, it does take a while for them to kind of explain all of the terminology so that you get it, but it is still very fast paced. My favorite thing about this series is that everything seems kind of natural within Tao's progression, because he doesn't just turn into this amazing warrior overnight, and you can see where he stumbles and how he picks himself back up, and that makes him stronger. So it's a very realistic progression of his character. If you are somebody who likes character driven stories like me, this is a little bit difficult to connect to Tao, because he's so focused on his mission that everything else kind of just like fades to the background for him, and he's not really a person at this point, because the only thing about him, his only motivation, is to get the revenge that he's so desperately seeking. I will say that this has an excellent cast of side characters for you to connect to, and the second book in particular has this one scene that was told from the perspective of a character that we don't read from up until that moment, and choosing to have that scene from that character's perspective just blew my mind, and I thought it was so poignant. Tao's character progression is very naturalistic throughout this first book, and it continues that way throughout the second book as well. So a lot of this series and Tao's story has a lot to do with grief, which is why we still don't have the third book in this series yet, because the author Evan Winter actually lost one of his own family members, and I think he's been finding it difficult to write about grief when he's in that place, because to write the story he has to keep putting himself back into that place that he obviously mentally doesn't want to be. I'm really excited, especially with how the second book ended, for this series to continue. So there you have it. Those are all of these series that I have finished or I'm up to date on so far in the first half of 2022. Very shortly this video will be followed up by all of the series that I need to continue. So I've either made progress on them or I've started them in 2022, but they are fully completed series, or there's more books published that I still haven't read. So do keep an eye out for that if you are interested. Down in the comments, please let me know how many series you've actually finished this year and how many you have left open. Like, are you doing well, or are you like I used to be, the thing that I'm recovering from, where you just keep starting series but never continuing or finishing them? But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you're a go when nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.